following is intended to provoke thought and challenge our assumptions. The opinions we hold are subject to change based on new and valid information. Your discretion is advised.
All right, we're back online. So
This is Social Thorns. Let's jump into it.
yeah, let's jump into it. So we were talking about Prop 22s and fall, and we're preparing for a debate, but we're having a pre-debate.
That might never happen because I'm so lazy.
Dude, you need to do
I'll
this.
I'll do it.
Yeah,
because I'm interested.
It's super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's my question: I'm genuinely curious. For me, it all comes back to the drivers, and really, what is best for the drivers? That's ultimately. I care about the drivers more than I care about the consumers of the app, more than I care about the company, more than I care about the state. So what?
More than you care about the state?
Yeah, the revenue to the state.
Oh, okay.
So for me, it's the drivers. What's best for them? So
it's I don't care about climate change. What I care about is the drivers.
Exactly. That's exactly how I feel. I don't give a shit about the sun melting us all. I care about the drivers. And so, in making sure that people are paying their fair share and the drivers are getting the best deal they can. So I guess my question is
well, the drivers getting the best deal they can is I just drove you from your house to my house and I just made $200. That's the best deal for sure.
How did you make $200?
That's the best deal.
Oh, well.
All right, I'm being facetious.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, but my question is so what is with what we have now, where they're contractors still, I don't know. I just feel I feel like it was ground lost. I feel like they were classified as employees, and that was gravy. Yeah. And now. Yeah, so having done your research on this thing, what is your ultimate take on it? Do you feel it was good for the drivers in the end, or do you who do you feel won?
Oh, definitely.
I guess that's my question.
Definitely Uber and Lyft won.
Yeah.
And again, when we have our debate, we'll go over a few different topics and we'll screen those topics ahead of time, and we'll both agree to what sources we'll both use to talk about. And the reason why I say that is because so many people go into debates thinking they'll bring the smoking gun, and that's not a proper debate. You don't bring in extra facts that people weren't aware of.
Yeah, and the point is to inform people on both sides, right?
Yes. Yeah. And to show that there's actually overlap in our positions. And I think that the drivers definitely probably would have made a lot more money on the AB5 model if they were classified that way. Overall.
But would they though? They'd lose all this money to payroll tax.
They would, but
they're not technically
but
losing
with Prop
it.
22, there's that provision that talks about engaged time, and that is one of the sneaky things that Prop 22 did.
Because most of their time isn't engaged; it's just driving to the next ride.
Right. So if you're thinking about traditional employment, you're getting paid for cleaning your car. And right now you have to clean your car every time. Whether or not you're actually doing it is a separate issue, but you're cleaning your car maintenance, waiting for the next ride. You're not engaged all the time. So to get actual 8 hours or whatever is the minimum requirement, 32 hours throughout the week for engaged time to even meet the minimum threshold.
No way.
Yeah.
That's tough.
And I think they have part-time thresholds too, if I recall correctly. I don't have it in front of me, but I think there was part-time where you get partial benefits and then full-time. Okay. But just let's say part-time is 16 hours. Well, full-time is 32 hours. Yeah. To hit that, you're working.
That's a lot of Uber driving.
You're spending a lot of time in your car, and you're spending way more than 32 hours in your vehicle.
Way more, because even Uber's actually at times fairly efficient with lining up your next ride.
Right.
So sometimes you just go from ride to ride to ride to ride, and it's gravy.
Yeah.
But other times, it's
stuck.
An hour, and you're I guess I'll drive to the airport now, or whatever,
Right. And I think that, on the other hand too, you have to think that Uber and Lyft would have a tough time quantifying how much time you're actually engaging in Uber and Lyft-like activities. So I could see from their end, I don't know that you're actually washing your car and maintaining your vehicle. How do I account for that? So the engaged time is, but so I am saying though that that's where they'd probably be losing money over and above just payroll tax. I think that they would have definitely benefited in terms of making more money, but whether or not that also means that they would cut staff at Lyft and Uber, they probably would have trimmed the workforce. They probably would have made cutbacks. I don't want to get into this too much right now.
Yeah, are they even profitable now? Like,
no, they're not profitable.
Yeah, so many of these things, they just like VCs just throw endless money at them.
Right, because it's all about scalability. And they
might never be profitable.
Right, and if you think about taxis, right, the big difference, there's a lot of differences.
How do you compete with something like that doesn't have to be profitable? You don't. You're just effed. You know what I mean? Like if you're the old taxi system.
Right, I could just lose money and
you're up against
you.
A company that's totally fine with losing $3 billion a year. It's something insane. Like it's an absurd amount of money.
Insane.
And it's like, how do you compete with that guy who's willing to lose $3 billion a year to make sure you die?
Yeah.
Like, man, that's tough.
All to corner the market.
Yeah,
right?
That's hard.
Like, dude, take the market. It's not even worth it now.
Yeah, that's a tough one to compete with.
But like when we're thinking about the amount of money that these companies would have to pay out if they were all classified as employees, the big difference between a taxi company, one of the big differences between a taxi company and Uber and Lyft is the taxi company doesn't have hundreds and hundreds of computer scientists who work on developing algorithms, and those people's salaries are in the $200,000-$300,000 range. So we forget that it's not just drivers that work at Uber and Lyft. You have computer and data scientists that
those guys are all salaried though. And they're employees.
Oh, they're definitely employees.
They're in a totally different boat.
Right.
They're on the gravy train.
Right.
And they should be. They're very bright and they're working hopefully pretty hard. And they're providing a great service.
Yeah, actually, one of my buddies works at Uber Eats, not as a driver, but as a computer scientist. But you also, you can't. So it's hard to compare the workforces because it's not just drivers. It's also this whole other business segment. Or overhead that these companies have. So,
but that's business overhead that any company has.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no different from like they're no different than any other business that's ever existed. They're trying to get this special exemption.
They did get this special exemption.
They did actually. And I hate us for it. Yeah. We gave them this special exemption, but in my mind, and I do look forward to this actually now that we're talking about it.
That's why I'm trying to encourage you. You really should.
Because I actually feel quite passionate about it. I just don't have, and this is probably how many people feel about many things.
Yeah.
I just don't have all the data to back it up.
Yeah. I would encourage you to dig into it. Maybe just spend a few hours in the weekend or something like that and look into it. One recommendation I have is I forgot which local newspaper had a prop yes campaign and no campaign, and they did like an hour discussion with panelists, and they had an Uber driver there who, he sounds articulate, but he's actually formed really poor arguments, and they have a lawyer there who's for the no campaign. But I want to shift it to talk about how. And we were talking about this. This is how we got on the subject. Was that the fallout from the propositions? I've been so amused to see how sore losers there are on whoever lost their ballot position. The way that they frame why they lost.
Well, at least they're admitting they lost.
Yeah.
Unlike our president.
Hey, we're still counting votes, man.
Every vote counts.
Every vote
counts. Add them all up.
But the ones against me.
Yeah, don't count those. Those don't count. Those were illegal.
So I'll give you an example. So obviously with Uber and Lyft, the amount of money that they poured into it is a big feature. And so
it's $200 million or something?
$205
million.
And when we initially did the podcast, it was $98 million.
How could they afford to pay these poor Uber drivers. These Uber drivers living high on the horse, because Uber can't afford to pay them.
No.
And sure as shit can't afford to pay payroll tax, even though they lose money every year that's just being thrown at them from VC.
Every year.
Yeah, this whole thing makes perfect sense in like this obscuro upside down world.
So the common theme is Uber and Lyft bought an exemption.
Yeah.
And so because the person writing it is obviously more for the no campaign, they frame it as if because Uber outspent, I think one highlight was 10-1.
Yeah.
So what would that be? 20 million for the no campaign, 10-1. Because they got outspent, that's why they lost. That's one articulation. There's also
So who would be the people who would raise the 20 million?
Well, hold on. Let me keep going on
Okay,
this because this is hilarious. So I was curious, so I pulled some data from Ballotpedia, and I started running some analyses on the last 2 years of how much money the campaign spent versus how many votes they got. And
ooh, interesting.
yeah, so I'm doing my own like little correlation analysis.
This is pretty cool.
And then a regression analysis. So I'm actually going to save it for a little later because the analysis that I did isn't complete. I did.
You can't tease that shit. What are you finding so far?
So there is a correlation with if they spent more money, they were more likely to win. There is a correlation there.
Yeah, but okay. I mean, that seems logical.
It seems logical, so I need to dig into it further. That's why I'm not ready.
I like that because that really shows the power of marketing, folks.
Yeah.
Those of you who don't believe in marketing, listen to that.
But I need to do a little bit more restructuring of how I organize the data and how I actually analyze the data because you also
I think we should throw out false and bad information regularly that's poorly researched.
But
I think
you
we
also
should
have,
become known for that.
So I don't think that the effect of money is actually going to be as impactful as we think. So there was a correlation on a basic 0-1. We won 0-1. We had more money. So I did that kind of correlation. So that's a very superficial level because I'm not actually correlating or doing a regression analysis on if I spent X amount of money, I got X amount of votes. Because so I need to reorganize the data and rerun some analyses. But here are some funny outliers. When you said who are the people that spent this money, there was one ballot position that got like I think it was like some ridiculous amount of millions of dollars, and the opposition campaign got $3,000 and they lost. And I'm like, who was a freaking sucker that
Who put up the 3K?
You just lost your money.
But you know what's interesting about that though is like it's not like on the surface a gut reaction to that might be you see everyone's buying every ballot measure, but really hypothetically the voting system is supposed to help the majority have what they feel like works, while at the same time hopefully protecting the minority with other protections or whatever. But so like if they're raising more money, there could be an argument that there's more people who are behind it, and therefore it's easier to raise money for that to make it happen.
Yeah. So
there might be an argument there, but
let me give you another example.
As you dig into data, you might see that, well, no.
Let me give you another example, 2 case studies. So this year we also had another ballot proposition that they outspent the opposition 20-1. 20-1. So there's $20 million to $1 million.
Okay.
And that campaign failed.
What was that?
Prop 16.
Which one's that?
Which was to reinstate affirmative action.
Huh.
So that campaign
people
lost.
Just didn't want it.
People didn't want it.
Yeah.
And so, but the narrative of why it lost, there was an interview and article on it from this student president of the UC San Diego, not San Diego, the UC system, University of California system.
Yeah.
And he was saying, it's because people were confused. The germ of the no campaign and the confusion of affirmative action spread. So here we're saying Uber and Lyft bought the election because they outspent, and we're highlighting they got outspent 10-1. I'm like, but on the same ballot that we're voting on, there is
a 20-1,
a 20-1
that lost.
So then, that's why I need to dig deeper into the correlation. Is that true? 2 years ago in 2016, there was a vote to increase tax on cigarettes, and I think the campaign had like, I can't remember the exact figure, it was like $10 million dollars. It was a significant amount of money. The tobacco company put up $110 million and they lost. That was the opposition campaign.
Sometimes when money comes too easily, you're very poor with your money.
Right. So,
You know, like if you got like the big tobacco lobby behind you and you're like, yeah, I need more money. You're like, Sinan, hey, come work for me for a week. I'm going to pay you 40 grand or whatever.
That would be pretty sweet. Not to get paid 40 grand for a year, but like for a week. Yeah, that'd be great.
Paid out for a year? Come on, what kind of bribe is this?
So I'm going to dig into that, and I'm actually going to go back further than 2 years and get more data on there. So I have a number of votes for both the yes and no, and then I have how much money yes and no spent. And then some campaigns, there's literally 0 to 0. And so that also helps with kind of like, stabilizing the analysis.
That's pretty cool.
Another one is that, especially for Prop 22, is that voters were confused, right? They had misinformation. And what you're doing is actually minimizing the intelligence of the voter when you say that, is that you're assuming that 56% or a sizable chunk of that 56% didn't really know what they were doing.
I would like buy into that if it wasn't for how I see people supporting Trump and like getting caught up in these crazy news feeds and things like that.
But wouldn't that also, if that is true, wouldn't that apply to the no side as well?
Not necessarily. Because you need a like an organized effort to instill and act as a catalyst to the misinformation. Like the misinformation doesn't come from nowhere. There's a group that puts a consistent effort to get it out there to obscure a topic so that it's easier to sway.
Barbara Bree falls asleep at meetings.
Yeah, exactly.
Todd Gloria won't fall asleep during meetings.
Trump's doing the most obvious example of it right now with like, I haven't lost, like we won. They're stealing the election. And that's the same that they've been doing for years, and it's been organized. But like, this is actually a really interesting political thing. It might be slightly off topic, but like the Republican Party has been phenomenal at working on voters all the time, like regardless of whether it's an election year or not. And the Democratic Party has been very poor historically. They're getting into that game now of working on indoctrinating voters 24/7, 365, election year or not.
They're working on it. I mean, I think this year has been an exceptional year for that kind of rhetoric from Democrats, particularly with George Floyd, BLM.
But not to jump around too much, I just bring that up in relation to the yes/no votes is like the misinformation generally has an origin.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm just saying
it's not
that
like one random guy
to say that Californians were confused and that's why they voted yes on Prop 22 is a real disservice to the intellect of Californians.
I don't know though, it was confusing. Wasn't it?
Well, I thought the campaigns were super misleading. I think that Uber and Lyft were very misleading in how they organized the information, but also AB5 and the No campaign was also pretty misleading as well.
Yeah, that's, I think, the place where I need to dive in order to have this conversation with you is like really understanding AB5. Because like on the like I know why there was an attempt to create something like AB5, and I understand that, but I don't know if what was created is better than what was before.
Sure. And what I think what we should also talk about when we have our debate is the trucking industry and how that's been completely decimated in terms of its current business model, and that's totally shifting. But whether or not that's correct,
they're all going to the Lyft Uber model.
That's
now.
what I was thinking. Why wouldn't you?
No, there was a company in my old office. I think it was called GoShare or something like that, and they're basically Uber for truckers.
I mean, that's the way. You're now exempt, so you can be a independent contractor because you're an app-based driver.
Yeah, they were literally an Uber for truckers, and they were growing like gangbusters.
Yeah, it's a wild thing, and it's just so funny to see people try to understand why they lost and to fit excuses into it. And then for Uber and Lyft, it's obvious that they paid for their win, but for Prop 16, they didn't pay. It's just voters were confused.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I voted against 16 because I felt like it was a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Because I felt like if you could make hiring decisions based off of race or ethnicity or whatever, then you could make lots of other decisions as well. And it was kind of in my mind, with a very modest understanding of it. Yeah. That's kind of where I went with it, which is why I was against it.
And I have a pretty good understanding of affirmative action just because of my education and background.
Yeah, because you're a black Indian.
Yeah, black Indian.
Katie, what's the other one that Kamala Harris is?
Southeast Asian. Yeah, that's what they constantly highlight. I'm
you're
not black Indian.
You're
by
a
the
black
way.
Indian, Southeast Asian.
Yeah.
Correct?
Close.
Middle Eastern. Sorry.
Very good. But the affirmative action thing is just, I have a background in that kind of like understanding of the law because it's just that was part of the program that I went through in the master's program.
Yeah, you know this stuff, man.
Which was really great. And at the time I was begrudgingly going through the course, but it was actually super valuable because it's a very misunderstood law, and it's also a very contentious law.
Can you is there a way to give a cliff notes on it, or is it a whole other podcast?
Hey man, it's episode 9.
Yeah.
I think it's episode 9. Yeah, where I give an overview of the affirmative action. So if people want to check that out, there's a whole thing that I provide on episode 9 of how affirmative action works and how it came to be what it is today. Because Scott thought it was a quota system, and that actually got banned in like 1978. I want to say.
Okay.
So you can't do quota systems. That's a false. That hasn't been around in 50 years.
Okay. So you can't have 5% of our workforce has to be.
That's super illegal.
Yeah. Token.
Yeah. Super illegal.
This person.
Yeah. You can't do that. But I did want to talk to you because I know a little bit about it. So I want to shift gears and not talk politics today, but still talk about something uncomfortable, and that is. You had a term like people listening don't know, and you mention it, but they don't know anything about it. You mentioned that you have a disability.
Yeah.
And it's not, you weren't born that way.
Right.
So I've heard the story, but I don't think I've asked you in depth about it, and I want to talk about it because I think for a lot of people that kind of stuff is uncomfortable. And this is Social Thorns. We talk about uncomfortable stuff. So tell me, why are you disabled? What are you disabled with? And what happened?
Yeah, and that's like before we even like jump into it all, it's I don't know if this is interesting for people or not, but I'm happy to go into it. But before we even get there, in the past, like, so it's been 17, 18 years since I broke my neck. Like, it's been a long time. And so there was actually a moment, I broke my neck when I was 17, almost 18. There was a moment fairly recently where I was alive longer with my injury than without. It was like I'd crossed over. And that actually was kind of a really good feeling. And it was interesting to like build up your whole life, because at 17, you're still a kid, but you've got your identity built on certain things, and and then I kind of started building like new friends and new hobbies, and everything really kind of had to shift and change right then. It was just like a hard turn in your life. But for the longest time, I actually really liked talking about it because it was like so close to me and it was so relevant and all of that. And now I'm never offended if anybody asked, or I'm never, I'm not like, I'm not sensitive about it. But now I don't like talking about it as much because it seems so less relevant. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't really understand, but like I can follow along.
Yeah, because it just feels less relevant. Like whereas then it was like, yeah, like it just happened and it's like it's so real and it's so serious and it was such a event. And now it's like, yeah, when I was 17 I broke my neck. And it's like, where do you want to get a sandwich? Like you just kind of move on. And like my experience with it is totally like there's a lot of people who fall into my camp. So we're like technically, if you were to like classify the group, like I had a spinal cord injury. I broke my second, third, and fourth and fifth actually cervical vertebrae, and I had an incomplete injury. So in spinal cord injuries, you've got two big classifications: complete or incomplete. Complete is what you don't want. Incomplete is what you do.
Yeah. So complete is like you're a vegetable.
No, it's from the level of your injury below. So like from the head down.
Oh, you're done.
Where you broke your neck. Basically, complete means you have like no mobility or movement or feeling below your injury site. Whereas with an incomplete, you maintain some movement or ability below your injury site. So like, so as someone who's incomplete, technically I'm like what's considered like a walking quadriplegic. So every one of my limbs is affected, some more than others, below my injury site, but I'm not complete.
Right.
And so at first I was kind of offended when somebody would be like, what level are you? And like spinal cord guys will just throw that out there because it's like, yeah, like a lot about that person really quickly. If they're like, yeah, I'm C6 complete, you're like, oh, that like C6 is like cervical vertebrae from your head to your shoulders. And then like it starts from the top 1, 2, 3, counting down to your shoulders. Like C6 complete, like you probably don't have your hands.
Wow.
And so you can like kind of do like weird little gripping things or like use stuff, but like, like that's gnarly, or like you might not have a lot of shoulder strength. So maybe you can push yourself in a wheelchair, maybe you can't.
Wow.
So anyway, so like there's these classifications.
So what happened? Like,
Yeah.
what was the accident?
So probably the more interesting stuff is this, but so like,
No, we're gonna come back to that.
yeah,
But you're leaving me on a cliffhanger. You're like, when I had my accident, let's gloss over that detail.
yeah. So, and it is funny, and I get a lot of different reactions. But basically, like when I was 17, I was a pretty adventurous kid, really into extreme sports like downhill skateboarding. I was like training to be a big wave surfer. I just like, yeah, I did a lot of like, I love snowboarding and stuff. But so like,
You were a San Diego kid.
yeah, San Diego kid.
Californian boy.
Yeah, like through and through surf rat, But we would, we had to do a project for a Spanish class, which was make a little video.
Okay, I'm trying to like, how does it go from Spanish class?
Yeah.
¿Dónde está la biblioteca?
Yeah,
and then someone decked me in the face.
I don't know why in like Spanish class there were all these like assignments that were like make a video with your team. And so like one of the we were gonna just make a video with our team, and our idea was to do a bunch of stupid stunts and then dub over it in Spanish.
That's pretty hilarious.
It was gonna be pretty funny.
Yeah, like ¿Dónde está la biblioteca? And then you're doing some like crazy jump off a roof or something.
Yeah, just something, And so like, and we didn't really think it through that far, but but so it was. I can't remember if it was like a Saturday or Sunday morning. And my buddy Nick came and picked me up, and then in his like little Ford Ranger thing, and then we were brainstorming ideas of like what to do. And I think I had the idea of rolling down a hill in a trash can.
Okay.
And I think I got it from like a really old Wind and Sea surf video where dudes would like hop into a tire, this like giant tire, and push themselves into the water. Mm-hmm. And so you'd roll down into the water and then you'd get out and be all,
oh, sick.
Yeah, like disoriented, I guess.
And was this pre-Jackass or like current Jackass?
No, this was like post Jackass. Like
okay.
Jackass had like its like big rise, but like I don't think it was
2000-ish.
This was 2003 when I had my injury, and I think Jackass was really big like 2000, 2001, 2002.
Okay.
Like it wasn't super popular, but it was still out there.
Yeah.
So this was like probably very Jackass inspired. Like that's a part that I don't like to like admit, or think about, but it's probably quite true.
Yeah.
Like it definitely fed into it. So anyway, yeah, so we like, I had the idea to roll down the hill. So we grabbed like a plastic like gardening trash can, and then we went looking for a hill. And as we were looking around for a hill, we realized that like maybe it'd be a good idea to have like some safety precautions. So we went to Nick's house and grabbed his like little sister's like bike helmet, which was like a little pink plastic styrofoam helmet with like the netting on it.
Yeah.
So we grabbed that.
They test rate those against semis, so you're
probably fine. Probably kept me away from a brain injury. But so then we went and thank you, styrofoam helmet. But so then we went and we like found the first hill, but it wasn't like soft enough, and that was at Lohay Elementary. And so then we drove around and we went up to Muirlands, and right above Muirlands on Nautilus Street that goes up Mount Soledad, there's like a really steep slope off to the north side that goes down to the golf course. So it's like when you stand at the top of that hill, no sane person would think you could roll down that and not get hurt.
Oh my God.
Like you look at it, it's huge.
My heart's like
it's like
pounding.
8 stories probably tall. It's probably a 45-degree slope, but it's all ice plant, so at least it's soft. And and so my buddy Nick,
but the garden
the trash
can would be rolling so fast with weight in it.
I do have this on video.
Oh my God.
We might have to watch that.
Oh my God.
I wonder if I could find it. I have it on YouTube, I think, but I like kind of hid it. So there's.
It's on YouTube?
I guess.
Holy
maybe it's Vimeo.
shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like you should watch it.
I feel like we should, but I really don't want to right now.
Yeah, we'll give it a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
You'll feel the neck break. You'll be like, oh shit, Hollis, I can't move. Call the ambulance. No, but so so my buddy Nick went down the hill twice before me, in the hill, but he kind of like.
Wait, in the trash can?
In the trash can.
Whoa.
But I pushed him both times.
Whoa.
We actually were fighting over who got to go first, but he aborted kind of like halfway down and like jumped out. The first time he kind of jumped out early, and then the second time I think he went all the way down.
Wow.
Came out fine. So then I hopped in the trash can. My buddy Tim was with us. Tim, Guy, Nick, and myself. That was the team. And I crouched in there in like a little tiny ball. And then Guy tipped me over. Maybe Tim tipped me over. I don't remember. But I think Tim pushed me down the hill. And, if Tim's listening to this, which he probably isn't, I know he feels a little bit of guilt, or at least I've heard through the grapevine, because he pushed me like really fast.
Absolutely.
Like he like kicked it and like launched it. And so I think I started off going really fast. And it was one of those moments where like I got pinned to the back of the trash can, and instantly I knew, okay, wait, this could go bad.
Oh my God.
Like I was like this, and at that point I was going so fast that there wasn't really a way out of it. So you just kind of have to ride this out. And in surfing, when you wipe out in bigger surf, you want to relax, because otherwise if you fight it and whatever, you're just burning up oxygen. So I kind of learned like, all right, I'm just going to like go with this thing. I'll be at the bottom of the hill and then I'll be fine. So as I'm going down the hill, I feel myself like hit the hill and bounce up, and like I'm like flying. Like you literally, if you watch it back, you see the trash can only makes contact with the hill like 3 times.
Whoa.
Over the whole like 8 stories. It's like boom, it hits once.
And that didn't happen before.
No, when Nick did it, he stayed like on the hill pretty good.
Whoa.
But I was like bouncing. So the first time I bounce, I'm like thrown up in the air and I'm just spinning. I come down. The second time I bounce, same thing. And I think it's the third time I bounced, and instead of rolling, I started going head over heels. And so I started cartwheeling, but it was just one big cartwheel, boom, right onto my forehead at the very bottom of the hill. So I land square on my forehead, and then I just slide to a stop because I'm at the bottom of the hill. So it was like the fastest I could have been going was the point where I hit my head. And I hit it like really square. And so I remember laying at the bottom of the hill and like kind of like, I don't think I ever passed out, but I remember laying there and then thinking, okay, like sending the signal to my body to move, like get out of the trash can. And then nothing happened. And then I remember like, that's weird. So then I like sent the signal again. And it's weird to even think about it like a signal because we're so used to moving our bodies, it just happens. But it was like because it wasn't getting through, I was like registering it as a signal. So I was like, okay, get out of the trash can. Like nothing happened. I think I did that a few times. And then I was like, oh shit, like I can't move. And then I could feel the ice plant on the side of my face, the right side of my face. And I could, and that was it. And so then I started to think, what have I done? And if I can't figure out how to move, maybe I'm dead. Maybe I've died. And so then I was like, okay, wait. I was like, I need to do like a systems check to see what's working and what isn't.
You're not in pain at this point? Like there's no pain?
I have this like really strong like crick in my neck. Like it was painful, but not excruciating. And the pain wasn't the scary part. Like the pain was not as bad as the disconnected feeling from my body. Like you're like my body just disappeared, just completely disappeared. It's like hard to imagine it. Like it's really a weird feeling. Like all of a sudden your body just doesn't exist. Yeah. So then when I did like my systems check, I like kind of exhaled and was like, okay. And I breathed in. I was like, I seem to be able to breathe. And then I like yelled. I was like, guys. And I was like, you can talk. I was like, so you're probably not dead. Because they responded. So I was like, I'm not a ghost. I literally was thinking that. And then after that, it was, then it was just like, oh shit, my dad's probably going to kill me. Because like I really screwed up this time. Because like I was always kind of a reckless kid and I got myself into some trouble. And like this one, I really felt like this time you really did it, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of weird to think that. And it also was kind of an immature thought of like not recognizing the severity of the situation.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm in trouble.
Yeah. And so then it was like...
I killed someone. Oops.
It's like, I just didn't realize how much of a life change this was going to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's like kind of like the first part. Like that's like up to injury right there. And like, I don't know if you have questions about any of that stuff.
Dude, that's some heavy stuff.
It's crazy.
Like, you never went through like your retelling of it. Was so hard to listen to. It's just, that's hard.
I feel my body like tensing up as I think about it. Yeah. Yeah. Cause it was like an absolute game changer for everything.
Yeah. What was the response right after from your buddies that were there?
So once I like realized I couldn't move, like Nick yelled down, and he's still one of my like best friends. Like I talk to him, almost every couple days probably. And, he yelled down like, hey, are you all right? And I just remember like being like, well, I don't know, And so he came down and I was like, guys, like I can't move. And so they kind of like stayed back and they didn't like grab me too much or anything. They were just like, oh shit, really? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, are you sure? I'm like, I can't move anything. And so then they kind of started poking me. Like, can you feel this? Like they like poked my leg. And I was like, no, I can't feel it. They're like poking me here. Can you feel this? I was like, no. And this went on for a little bit. And then eventually I started to get a bit overwhelmed, and I was like, whoa, like this is real.
Yeah.
So then I closed my eyes just to like take a moment. And as I did that, they were like, hey, can you feel this? And I was like, no, I don't feel anything. They're like, are you sure you can't feel this? And I was like, no, I don't feel anything. And my eyes are closed, so I don't know what they're doing. And then I finally opened my eyes and I realized they've got my hand in front of my face and they're just waving it. And I had no clue. And that was the moment where it just all clicked, where I was like, and then as Tim put it in like almost eerily calm voice, I was like, guys, this is serious. I think it's time to call the paramedics.
He said that.
I said that.
Oh, he did.
So I said that. I kind of made that declaration like, I think this is it, guys. I think we've really done it this time. Yeah, and so then they called the paramedics, and where I was at the bottom of this big ice plant hill, basically in a canyon.
Yeah, so it's not like they just pull up.
There's no road down there, but what there is there's a golf course that goes right up to it. So it's about a 100-meter walk from the golf course to where I was. So like, I see the fire truck show up and they're at the top of the hill, and you know the guys run down and they're asking me some questions, and I don't remember a lot of that, but they're trying to figure out how are we going to get them out. So like, are we going to load them on a gurney and try to pull them up the hill? Are we going to try to life flight them? Are we going to like, and what they ended up choosing to do was to cut the chain link fence to the golf course, drive the ambulance on the golf course to the fence, and then hike me about 100 yards over there. Yeah, it was the right move. But so as they're loading me up, like one of the guys, he rolls me onto the gurney and then takes the helmet off. And he was like, oh, and I forgot, I was also wearing swim goggles. I was wearing swim goggles.
Wow.
So he takes the helmet off and the swim goggles. And he was like, what are the swim goggles for? And I was like, well, in case I got flies in my eyes. And I just saw this look on his face of just like sadness and disappointment.
God.
Of just like, you have no idea the world you just entered. You know, just like I could like see that in his face. And so,
is that like pretty clear in your mind?
oh yeah, that's like, you know, there's a couple of moments that are just like sliced, and that's like one of them. But to be honest with you, I couldn't ID him in a lineup if you'd ask me. Sure. And I always kind of wanted to like find them and thank them, but I guess you're like not allowed to or something.
Yeah. You just know that he was not happy with what you said. Like he didn't find the humor in it. Like, cause like if this is a sitcom, you're like ha 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 ha, right? Like,
exactly. Like for me, I was still looking for like jokes and silver lining, but him like knowing something about this stuff, he was like probably wanted to laugh, but was like sad that like, sorry bro, like you don't know like what just happened to you, which is really the case. Like I had no concept of the severity, which stayed with me for quite a while, and I think was actually a good thing, which I can get into in a bit. But so when they got me in the ambulance, then Nick managed to persuade them to like let him in there with me. So he rode with me in the ambulance, and as we're driving, all I remember is that the ride was like super smooth. And in retrospect, I think back like, well, yeah, because you couldn't feel anything. Like your head was on a pillow and that's all you could feel. But Nick leaned over to me at one point and he said like, you know, hey, like, what are you thinking about? And I was like, I don't know, like, is this permanent? Like, what did we just do? And he was like, no, like, are you thinking about anything else? And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, and he kind of like motions and he's like, you've got a boner. And like, and so in my head.
Wait, what?
Yeah, so I had an erection riding in the ambulance. And so like in my head, that was like, oh good, like something still works. Like thank God, like you can't kill me. Like I'm fine. You know, that was like a good thing.
The soldier stays strong.
Yeah, right. But meanwhile, the guys up front, the paramedics, I overheard him say like, I think he actually leaned back to me and he said like, that's not a good sign. And it meant something like you had lost so much like connection from like, you know, nervous system to body or whatever, that your body just kind of started to do weird shit. Like you know, like, and I don't know exactly what, but
Whoa.
kind of like you hear of like people getting rigor mortis, like boners when they die or something. Like, I don't know. Is that a real thing? Do people do that?
I've never heard that.
Does that not happen?
I hope I die with a boner. That's
Yeah,
just
right. I don't know. That might not be something that happens.
I hope
I
that
might
boy
have just made
stays
that
strong for as long as he can, you know.
I don't know. But so like,
So essentially, it's not just like boners. Like someone might have like hands that like shoot out, or like their toes might separate.
More like spasticity when you have upper motor neuron problems, meaning like brain or spinal cord injuries.
yeah.
By the way, for people listening, that's Hollis's wife. Okay.
And she is a physical therapist. Silver lining, breaking my neck is how I met my wife, and she's amazing. I love you. And I really mean that. I didn't mean for that to sound sarcastic or anything.
So you got a boner.
So I had this boner, and
So your buddy's
honestly,
helping you
that
out
kind of
with it.
like upped my mood a little bit. Like that was like, that kind of helped things. Like that made that much better.
So
Yeah.
so you're like looking up, right?
I'm just staring up.
And so
yeah.
and you're looking at him, and he's like, "Are you sure you're not thinking about else?" And then he like looks over the. Can you lift your neck and look down at your boner? So how do you know you have a boner?
No, they just
told-
all told me I had a boner.
Oh, you're like, sweet.
Yeah, so I couldn't feel it. I didn't know it was happening.
Wow.
I was just told that I had a boner, and that was good enough for me.
So what were you thinking about?
Honestly, not much. Like,
I believe that.
But there's like one thing that like I have this like saying that I kind of always go back to is like there's always a way. Like there's always a way. So no matter what your situation is, no matter what puzzle you're trying to solve, how bad it may look, there's always a way. So in my head, I was still very much like, there's a way to get out of this. I'm going to figure it out. There's a way. So like if there was one like reoccurring thing going on in my brain during that drive, that was it. It's like, I'm going to figure this thing out. I don't know how, but I'm going to get it. And so that was like, yeah. And then things got crazy because they unloaded me, and it was like everything went into like hyperspeed, you know, like in the movies where they like push you on a gurney and there's like people and stuff. I can't remember exactly if I don't remember. It all got kind of weird, but there was one moment where there were like a lot of people around over, and then there was another moment where like it all gets blurry in my mind, but where I was just laying there staring up at the ceiling, and I think my dad came by and my mom too. And my dad was crying, and my mom seemed totally fine. And I might have even apologized to my dad. I might have been like, sorry, Dad, which probably just made it a lot worse for him.
Yeah. That's
know?
that's the last. Like he doesn't want to hear you say sorry to him. Like
Yeah,
he
yeah,
probably feels so bad.
He just wants me to be okay, you know? Yeah. And then I go into emergency, and I don't remember much about that, but they like, you know, I did the MRI, I did, I think a bunch of x-rays and all of that. And the end result of all of that was you broke your second, third, and fourth, and fifth, which I always forget. Fifth?
3, 4, 5,
Yeah. 3, 4, 5, cervical vertebrae. No, but 2 and 4 got compressed together was the big thing. So those two got squished together and basically crushed 3.
Wow.
And that crush caused 3 to swivel out of place. So if you were to x-ray my neck now, it still looks all messed up. Like they like bolted it together. They fused. Well, anyway, that came like a week later. But this part, this is where things got really crazy. So like,
None of the previous stuff was crazy. It's crazy.
honestly, yeah. Like the time I spent in ICU was the scariest, most intense. Most it felt like I was like fighting for my life. That's actually even hard to think about now, and I haven't revisited it in a long time. But ICU is where things got scary. Like the hill, the ambulance ride, emergency. Those just kind of happened. I was kind of okay, except for this really bad pain in my neck and the fear of not being able to move. Like, but then ICU was where I actually felt like maybe I can die. That was like a different game. So like before, I think they put me in ICU, and then I don't remember the order of these things, but throughout my injury, there were moments in time where things could either go good or bad, and you needed each one of them to go good. So like one of them was, okay, he crushed his third vertebrae. Let's put him in traction. So let's stretch his neck out, which I think is really common. They just stretch you out, like literally put bolts in your neck and then like attach weights to it, and they just like hang them and like pull your head up. And so they do that, and what they're hoping is that the bones will just kind of fall back into place. Mm-hmm. And for me, they did. Like my third just kind of like went back where I was supposed to go. So that was good, but it was still like missing half of the vertebrae. And it had like bone fragments everywhere. But so then that was like a early win. That was like, good. That happened, and it was supposed to happen, and it's good. Meanwhile, there's a lot of like conversations going on with my family about like, your kid just broke his neck. You know, he may never walk again. You know, they didn't know if I was complete or incomplete at that point because I didn't have any mobility or function below the neck. So they couldn't give me a diagnosis like that. And what you got to look for is the swelling. So like if the injury can cause your spinal cord to swell, mm-hmm. and the inflammation, and anything that touches your spinal cord basically injures it, because all of the nerve endings that like transmit information are on these like axons, like they're called like myelin sheaths on the outside of the axon. Mm-hmm. So it's like the important part is on the outside instead of the inside. So it's really easy to damage it. And I hear it's like the consistency of like wet spaghetti. So like if you like poke a spinal cord with your finger, you could like fuck that spinal cord up. Wow. You know, so like a bone could like really do it. But anyway, so where was I? So I get into
swelling. You're swelling.
The swelling. Yeah. So I guess there's some steroid you can get that will like reduce your inflammation. And that's like a huge indicator. Like if you get that early, you'll be much better off down the road. So I got that pretty early. I think like 6 hours after my injury or something. And you've got a window to get that thing. And I think it's like 8 or 12 hours. Like it's fast. Like you got to get that early to stop the swelling. And if you do that, your chances of recovery are greatly improved. I used to know the stats on all this stuff, but like then they pushed me into ICU. And that's where things like were like scary, because they knew they needed to operate on my neck, but they didn't feel I was stable enough, which I guess means strong enough or healthy enough or I don't know, to do the operation. So basically they had to keep me in ICU until I was stabilized, could do surgery. Then after surgery, I might have to do a little more ICU to get out. So ICU was like pretty crazy. Am I like, should I keep going? Yeah. So like I'm in ICU, and one of my first questions, so first they like cut all my clothes off, just like with scissors. And in my head I was kind of like, hey, I want those. Like, and again, it was one of those things like you don't realize how serious this is. Like you've really, like your clothes don't matter at this point, you know? Yeah. Or like my shoes, like they like disappeared, and I like don't know what happened to my shoes. And I was like, where are my shoes? Like, you know, and they're like, you're not gonna need shoes for like a long ass time, kid. Like, don't worry about your fucking shoes. Just keep yourself alive. So like I was kind of preoccupied with like these little things that probably seemed insignificant, but to me they were like, I literally thought, like, once I was told that I had broken my neck, I thought this is temporary, even though they told me it might not be. I was like, this is temporary. And then I secretly, without telling anybody, set a goal that I was going to be the fastest person to recover from spinal cord injury in history. Mm-hmm. And I was like, in 6 months, I'm going to be surfing again. And that was like my goal that I secretly set. And I was like, I'm going to figure the way out of this thing. And I'm going to work every day to like meet that goal. And so that was like in the back of my head. But then I'm in there. And so like, you know, one of my first questions to the nurses was like, what do I do when I have to go to the bathroom? Because, like, I still didn't, like, I don't know. Like,
You can't feel anything.
I can't feel anything. I think at that point I didn't have, like, bowel or bladder control. And they had, like, a tube up my penis. Like, I had a catheter. So, like, it's a question that's just, like, I'm just not aware of my surroundings. I have no concept of, like, what's happening to me. You know, so, like, I'm asking questions of, like, and at that point, like, a lot of people with spinal cord injuries, like, can never actually go number 2 without some kind of, like, stimulus. It doesn't just happen. You have to, like, make it happen. So,
Because
like,
it still requires muscle contractions and relaxing.
yeah, I don't know exactly, but yeah, there's like, I think it takes some, like, control that, like, you just don't have. But for most people, I think the vast majority, it's that you can't poop, and so you need something to help you do it, and not the other way around, which I think in some ways, in a fucked up way, is kind of fortunate, I guess. Like,
Yeah, you just don't shit as soon as it comes out. You know?
yeah, I'd rather be on that side of the things than the other. But anyway, yeah. So then I'm in ICU, and then I was in ICU for like 7 days before I went in for my surgery, and that 7 days felt like an eternity, because I was hooked up to a million different sensors, and each sensor did a different thing. Like, but like, I was given some instructions. Like, so I had what's it called? A oximeter, a pulse oximeter? Pulse oximeter, which is like a little thing they put on your finger, and it monitors your oxygen level in your blood. And that's really important these days with COVID and stuff. Like, you got to watch that. But so they told me, like, you have to keep that number above, I think, 85 or something, because if you fall below that, then we might have to give you a trach, which is where they literally, like, stick a hose down your throat and breathe for you. And so this is all kind of relevant with COVID. Like, if you get like a ventilator, it's basically a ventilator. If you get like a ventilator to help you breathe, that happens in spinal cord injuries when you don't have any like chest or lung control. Sure. You can't do it. But like almost everyone who has that done ends up with pneumonia, because it's just really hard not to. Like, yeah. I don't know. It's just like,
that's not something your body's like, hey.
Yeah, like, it's a weird thing.
This is just a 5K of pneumonia I'm going to deal with right now, or 5K of was it track?
Yeah, I don't know. But so like, so that was like one of the games that I had. So I was like, all right, I have to keep that sensor above 85, which honestly was hard. And so I was like breathing, like trying to take like the deeper breaths I could and just like keep myself oxygenated at all times. And that was like a battle, where it was like I was constantly trying to keep myself above that, because I didn't want that trach, and I was told, like, yeah, there's a high risk of like getting pneumonia, and that's just going to make things more difficult. Yeah. And also, like, I don't know, I felt that everything that they did for me was something that I might never get back, and that really stuck with me. So like, if they were breathing for me now, in a year, are they still going to be breathing for me? If they're helping me put my shoes on, am I always going to need someone to help me put my shoes on? So I developed this really aggressive, like, disdain for anyone who was helping me with anything. But I understood in my situation. But if there was something that I could even come close to attempting, and this lasted with me for years, like for a long time, like if we were at the dinner table and somebody was like, does anyone want a glass of water? And they're like already up, I'd be like, I'll get it. You know, like weird stuff like that. Just because like I felt the need to like make sure I could do everything. Yeah. You know?
There's a dignity there.
Yeah, it was like, you know, I looked at my options, yeah. And like one option is like be stuck like this forever and not try to get better. And the other option is try to get better and still maybe get stuck like this forever. Mm-hmm. But if you don't do the try, there's a good chance you could end up with the first one. Yeah. But if you do the try, at least there's a chance that you might be able to have some agency over your situation to control the outcome, you know? So it's like, even though you don't know that it may work out or it may all just be futile, you know, you don't really have an option but to give it your all. And that was kind of how I reasoned it all. So I was like, I'm just going to put everything I can into this, no matter what, because I think it's the only option. Like, these are my options. There's only 2 of them, and they're both shitty, and at least one has a potential upside. So that was the approach I took to all of it. But that was, yeah. And then in ICU, there were like a lot of like scary moments in ICU. But my friends started showing up, and my friends started showing up in like waves. Like a lot of people were coming through, like constant. And a lot of them had to say they were family members or whatever. But like it was just like a constant parade of people. And some I was really happy to see, and some I was like, I didn't want you coming in here. Like there was one guy that I actually really hated. Like hated this guy. And he was like on like ASB or whatever.
What's ASB?
Associated Student Body. And he was just like the opposite of me. I was like this total like anarchist, whatever.
Yeah.
And he was like a kid who's like getting into politics in high school. And, but like he came in and I didn't really like him to start with. And then he asked me, like we small talked for a minute. And then he was like, was it worth it? And he was talking about like rolling down the hill. And I
was like, yeah.
What? Like it's such a weird question, you know? And I remember like not really knowing what to do with it. And I think I just said, you know, the honest, which is like, no, of course it wasn't fucking worth it. Like, what a stupid question.
Yeah.
Like, do you see where I am? Like, what's going on? But then I also had like lots of friends who were doing like really fun stuff coming in. Like the first thing we did was we put like surf posters everywhere. So like I could only look at the ceiling. So I had surf posters on the ceiling. I had stuff. And then like a lot of my friends were kind of like, you know, rebellious. So like I had friends who were like offering to bring me like booze and shit. Like, and I was like, no, man, like I can't like do that.
Yeah.
Like,
I drink, I die.
yeah. And then I had like, somebody came and like put a bunch of porn up, like big porn posters. But I was like, dude, I'm in the hospital. You can't put porn in my like hospital room. Like that's not cool. And so I was like, put it under that surfing poster. So I guess like under like half my surfing posters, I have like porn. And like at one point, like my friend David Bain, who was like a really good friend of mine, and he was like a really sensitive guy. And he was like tore up, and he came in, I could see it in his face. He was like, fuck, like he was like tearing up. And he was like, how you doing? I was like, hey Dave. I was like, go lift up that poster. And he walks over there and he lifts it up and he just starts laughing. And he told me years later, he was like, yeah, man. He was like, that was like the moment that I knew you were going to be fine. You know, like that little glimpse. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I kind of like lived for like those little moments of just like, yeah, it was just kind of getting through it. But there was times where like I had difficulty breathing at night and like there weren't nurses around. And like, basically when I had difficulty breathing, they could give me more oxygen. And I was just fighting for every breath. And I literally like, there were moments where I like thought I was dying, but I didn't have enough breath to like yell and I couldn't move anything to call a nurse. And if my parents or if somebody wasn't sleeping in the room, I was just on my own, which didn't happen often. And where I was, you had one nurse for every 2 patients. So they checked on you like constantly because you're on the edge. But like that was like one of the scariest moments of my life was like trying to yell for a nurse, not being able to, and like feeling like that I was going to pass out, like, you know, the room like going checkered and black and white and like just trying to like hang on to it, you know?
You're like, well, this is where it is. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And you're just fighting for it, you know? So that was like really, there were some scary moments. Yeah, but then like, you know, people kept visiting me and that helped a lot. And then I don't know, then I started doing physical therapy. So like once I got a little bit better, this was probably like day 3 or day 4 in there, they started bringing like a physical therapist by. And what I would do is I would lay and stare at the ceiling. And so I'm just staring up the ceiling. And then she would come and pick up my arm, my right arm. And she would tell me that she's holding my arm. And sometimes she'd like prop my head up so I could kind of see it, but sometimes she wouldn't. And then it's just there floating and I don't know it. And then she moves it and she says, okay, I moved your arm. And I go, okay. And then she says, try to move it back. And then I'm like, okay. and I can't feel anything. You could saw my arm off in front of me, and I would just watch you do it and be like, shit, that looks bad. Like it was that numb. Like it didn't exist. And so like the thought of like moving your arm is like stupid. Like it doesn't exist. How am I going to move it? So this went on for, days. But what I would do is I would try to move it. So she would move it, and then I'd try to recreate the movement, and I'd like try to do it. And then what I was doing was I was doing like muscle memory of like what I remembered surfing or what I remember playing soccer or doing push-ups or weightlifting, anything that was like a really strong muscle memory. And I was doing that stuff as she was doing this, and I was trying to do it. And then one day she was like, oh, you twitched your bicep. And I was like, oh shit. And then, so then I like tried to, it's weird, but I tried to put my brain in that exact same like position, almost like remembering a phone number or something, this exact same thought. And then I did it, and she was like, you twitched it again. And I was like, holy fuck. And so then she was like, yeah, keep doing that. So I was like, okay. She's like, that's firing your bicep. So the first thing I figured out how to do was fire my right bicep and contract it. And so
that's huge.
That
3 days, man.
That was huge. And it was, but it was just a twitch, but it was something. And so that's when I was like, all right, this is like, that was remembering a phone number for my bicep. It wasn't the same movement that it used to be. Like what used to move my bicep felt different now. It's harder to explain, but like it wasn't the same thought. So I was like, okay, if that's bicep, I'm going to do that 10,000 times. To like every moment I'm awake, I'm just going to do that until I've drilled that thought in, and I can do that every time. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, all right, trying to find the next one and the next one. And so I had like, once I had that, I was like, okay, this is how I could try to find all the muscles in my body and try to move them. So that was like a huge key and a big, like, you can do this moment. I was like, all right, now you know how you're going to try to do this. So for the first 3 or 4 days, I was just trying to survive. Then it was like, all right, this is how I'm going to try to get out of this. And I think at this point, it's important to note, like, when it comes to spinal cord injury, there's a lot of people out there who are like, oh, your attitude, man, like, that's why you recovered, and, you had a great attitude. And I think there's some merit to that, but it's not the whole thing. And I think it's really disingenuous to a lot of people who have spinal cord injuries, who probably worked harder than I did, who probably were smarter than I were, probably gave everything they could to try to move and try to recover. And just they never had the opportunity to even find that muscle twitch. Yeah. And I know that's a fact because with my left hand, everything I ever tried to get it to do was always the opposite, with very few exceptions, of what it was actually doing. And I could never really puzzle it out. And so my left hand is still like really affected. So I know that like it's not
just attitude.
It's not just attitude. Like attitude for sure plays a part in like your life afterwards, and probably you will recover more faster maybe. There might even be an argument that even if you did nothing, you'd still recover just as much. I don't quite buy into that. I think it does play a role because the longer you go not exercising those pathways, if you have them, they'll disappear. Like for me to remember the muscle memory of what it feels like to run, that's a complex movement. There's a lot going on. And for years I could remember running. Now I can't really remember it. Wow. At moments I have like, that's it. And I'm like, oh, it feels good just to think about it. But I don't have it, it's not there anymore, So like I put that in, like I share that at this point because a lot of people, when I tell them like I found the key, I did for me, but it all depends on your injury and what ultimately is going to be allowed. So I don't know. But to be honest with you, when I was doing those first bicep firings, like what you feel like when you're like, what can you bench right now, Sanan? Like, what's a good bench for you?
I don't bench, but
you like work out, you do push-ups and stuff, right?
I did a full handstand push-up today. This is my first one.
Perfect example. Like, how hard is it to do a handstand push-up? Like, how much like mental energy are you putting into pulling that off?
Yeah, twice a week, probably for the last several months, at least 7 months. And then in the moment, I'm doing nothing but that.
Yeah, and you're like, I mean, if there's 120% of Sanan, it's going there.
Yes.
Right? Like
To nothing. I'm not thinking about a single other thing.
everything you have is making that handstand push-up happen. That's what it felt like to twitch my bicep. And so every time it took it took handstand push-up amount of energy to twitch the bicep. And that was it. And everything ended up being that way at first. It took, like, it was like I was trying to bench 250. You know, it was the same to twitch my thumb. You know, like it was the same amount of just immense focus and effort just to get like that. So like that was like, so when I tell people that, they're like, oh, like, is your injury? I was like, part of it's injury, part of it's effort, you know, so like you should
Yeah,
never.
because like you said, if you didn't try at all, that wouldn't have happened, period.
Right, it might not have.
Like maybe one day you'd just be laying there and all of a sudden like, oh, I can move. But like,
Maybe.
that doesn't sound like the norm.
Maybe, you know, I don't know. Like I've never been through that, so I don't know. But for me, that's like how I addressed it. But it was like, yeah, so that was like, once I got that, then things like, I was like, all right, cool. So then they started parading surgeons by for like, to choose your surgeon. And, you know, like, they were pulling like some of like the best people, I guess. I don't know anything. I'm a kid, you know. But like one guy came in and he saw surf posters everywhere and he goes, hey, big surfer. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, hey, is that a poster of Big Rock? And like Big Rock was like my surf spot. And only lunatics surf it because it like, you basically take off straight into a rock. It's a foot deep and people break their backs and dislocate shoulders out there all the time. Wow. Super dangerous. Like if you do not know what you're doing, like don't surf Big Rock. So like,
Where is that?
It's just south of Windansea. It's like the next break south of Windansea. Okay. And it's out on this little point. Bottom of Palomar Street. Okay. But anyway, so like he came in and I was like, holy shit, this guy knows Big Rock? And I was like, you're hired. Like, like that was all I needed. Yeah. So I just told my parents, I was like, I like him. You know, he's good. And
so wait, they did like a blind date surgeon thing for you?
Yeah, I probably had like 3 or 4 surgeons come visit me.
Is that normal?
I don't know. I have no idea. Like, you know, I have nothing to compare it to.
They're probably like, dude, this guy's got a huge dick. Let's, I want to be the guy.
This guy's had a boner for 2 weeks straight.
Champ.
No, yeah, it was really, I don't know if that's normal. I have no idea. But he was great. His name was Timothy Peppers, and I haven't seen him in years, but super nice guy. He's got a
great name.
Yeah.
Pepper.
Exactly.
Timothy Pepper.
Yeah, he's got an office up in Encinitas.
He's Dr. Pepper.
He's Dr. Peppers. Super true.
No way.
Yeah.
You got operated on by Dr. Pepper?
And the best part is, so like as I'm getting wheeled into the surgery, they were like, this is Dr. Peppers, and here's your anesthesiologist. And
Mountain Dew?
He introduced himself as Dr. Plumber. And I still to this day don't know if that was really his name or not.
That's hilarious.
Like, I have no idea who that was. I think they were just fucking with me. Yeah. So I had Dr. Peppers and Dr. Plumber do my surgery. And
pause right there.
Yeah.
Let me just. Dang, dude. So that's really wow.
Crazy, huh?
That's insane.
So let me ask you something.
Okay.
So like, you've known me for 6 months, a year, something like that. Like not that long.
Not that long. It's been, I think, at least a year.
Maybe a year.
Yeah, at least a year. But we haven't been hanging out as much until it was like, because we hung out pre-COVID. I was like, this dude's awesome. And then COVID happened, so there was like a lull. And then I was like, let me pick this back up, reach back out to you, and then we started hanging out again. So probably it must have been maybe April or May when we hung out, because we live on 35th. Yeah, so
Okay. Yeah. So like we've really only like been like relatively close friends for like 6 months or so.
dude, isn't that crazy?
That is kind of. I feel like we've known each other a long time.
long
I really like
time,
that.
right?
So I'm curious for you,
Uh-huh.
like I meet people all the time, and most people are just like totally able-bodied and capable. What is it like for the other side, where you meet somebody, and there's clearly like something up, but you don't really want to ask them? You know, like what goes through your head? Like, was there anything? Like, did it even factor in, or like, what does
What do
that
you mean?
feel?
Like, do I want to ask, or what do you? I don't understand.
Like does it change the potential for friendship? Like, if there's like, yeah, like, I don't know, like does it factor into like the equation of like, is this somebody I want to hang out with? I guess.
Not really for me, mostly because I'm a diverse person to begin with. So I don't need you to be a rock climber to hang out with you. Right?
You're probably the most open-minded person I've ever met.
Well, I score that really high on open-mindedness in the
Yeah.
in the Big Five. I think I was close to the 99th percentile.
Because, you know, like,
Yeah.
well, no, so like I have like some people that I've met that through the grapevine, I've heard like there's certain like trips that like I don't get invited on or stuff like that, because they're like, he's gonna like slow it down, or like who's gonna like you know, he can't, like, obviously like back.
I think it's kind of fucked up. I'd rather let you self-select out than not invite you because I just assume that you
Right.
you
Or-
can't or whatever.
Yeah, or if there's like something the group wants to go do, like hey Hollis, we all really want to go do this, like I don't want people to like wait up for me, like, no, that's cool, like I'll do this thing while you guys go do that thing. You know, that's like totally fine with me. But like, yeah, it wasn't until very recently that I even realized that that's like actually a real thing. Yeah, well, that pops up with like certain people, like, you know.
Dude, if I was strong enough, if you want to go backpacking trip, I'd just carry you. But
Right, yeah.
I'm just not strong enough. If I was
Yeah.
like fucking a giant, I would do that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I should probably. But like, yeah, so I've always wondered like how, you know, for different people, does that factor in? Because I've made lots of great friends since my injury. And, you know, before my injury, my friendships were, you know, based on like sports or things we did together like that.
Yeah.
And now I have some like hobbies, like I go like off-roading, or I do like, you know, or just hanging out with people, drinking, talking. You know, as you get older, that's like more of what people do anyway, so it's kind of fine. But like, you know, but yeah, I've always wondered how much that factors in, and how much that might have affected my life without me even knowing it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think I naturally just pull more active people because it's just, that's where I'm spending so much time. But
It's how most friendships are built, on like common activities. You know?
right. But also, like, I could really use a friend who's really into food, and like all we do is go out to restaurants.
Right, yeah,
Like that's totally fine. Like, you know, there's a job opening on my on my friend list. If anybody listening, there's a job opening there. So I think that I was curious, but finding the appropriate time to ask is one thing. But then once you tell me, it doesn't really matter. It's just more to satiate my curiosity. As far as I know, you were born that way. I don't freaking know. So I don't know. That might be a good question for someone else who might be more uncomfortable, but I think that people who may be selecting for you without talking to you, there's probably some discomfort with your disability that they haven't addressed. And I've always been curious about that because the only thing I can even compare it to is I had this irrational fear of people with developmental disability. So not mental, but it similar in the sense of you deviate from normal movement or whatever, thought, characteristics, right? The way you walk is different. And there was an irrational fear that I had about people with developmental disabilities, so I went and was a job coach at Goodwill. And I literally just like, fuck it, I'm just going to do this. And that was, I mean, I can tell stories about, you know, the issues that I had at Goodwill and, you know, the kind of stuff that I saw there, but not in the treatment of people with developmental disabilities, but in terms of the people who actually helped people with developmental disabilities. And I realized, like, these are just people who just aren't very bright. Like, at the end of the day, there's nothing to be afraid of just because they're different. You just treat them like they're people, and it's fine. Like, that's it. And so if you move differently, I'm not going to be like, what's wrong with him? Can I catch it? You know what I mean? Like, I think there's some irrational aspect of it that if someone's making those assumptions about you, it's like, it's, and I don't know what their situation is, but I think it's demeaning.
You know,
I think it's demeaning. I think it's not treating you like a whole person.
It's a really good example, actually, because when I was doing my outpatient rehab at Sharp, I met a lot of people with spinal cord injuries in different situations. And one guy, he had a high-level complete spinal cord injury. He was in a wheelchair. He could move his hand enough to drive a joystick, but that was about it. And I was talking to him, and I told him about someone who interviewed me for a newspaper whose first question was, what are the benefits of having a spinal cord injury? And I yelled at her, and I sent her away. And I said, you come back when you have the real questions. And I got all mad at her.
That's kind of badass.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. And then she did, and we, like, you know, she wrote this
great... What kind of question is that? That doesn't make...
I don't know. We're kids, right? I mean, who knows? Yeah. But so I told him that story, and he said, you know, the thing that bothers me most about being in a wheelchair, like, he said his benefit was, like, his shoes stay new forever. And I was like, fair enough. but he said, you know, the thing that actually really bugs him is, like, people see him in a wheelchair and they assume he has some kind of developmental disability.
Sure.
And he's like, I'm as smart as I ever was. I'm just a guy in a wheelchair. You know, that's an assumption that I wish people wouldn't make.
I would say that, you know, and I would think that in some circumstances, actually, I would think in most circumstances, people would see this as a negative about me, but I actually believe that I have more of an indifference, which is similar to my kind of, you know, tough-mindedness. It's a little actually cold-hearted. So there's actually more of an indifference that I have rather than a I wouldn't want to say that I'm like, you know, Hollis, you're disabled, so I have to include you in everything. You know, like there's that end of the spectrum. I would say I'm more indifferent to it. So so it's like I kind of don't give a shit, which it sounds cold-hearted, but I actually think that that's more accepting than pretending that I have to accept, like that I'm showing you that I accept you. I don't need to show you that I accept you. I'll just hang around you if I like you. If I don't like you, you know, I don't have to try to be extra, you know, but I like you, so it's easy to hang around you. If I didn't like you, I just wouldn't hang around you.
I think, and I don't want to speak for like all people with disabilities, but I think most people with disabilities prefer that. Yeah. They prefer like just treat me like you would anybody else. Yeah. I don't need extra treatment. Like if I'm stuck in a place and like I can't like get up a curb or something, yeah, you can help me. That's totally cool. Yeah. You know, but like for the most part, like just treat me like you would anybody else. You know?
My natural inclination would be to be indifferent to it until you maybe said, "Hey, son, can I get a hug?" Like, oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I think part of it also comes from my background too. Growing up in Utah, is that, you know, I was constantly the person who was turned heads when I walked into a place. And it's like, I just felt like this freak all the time. And you just feel like this weirdo that people just just stare at. And it's like, you just can't be normal. And I think I internalized that and thought, why would I ever do that to someone else?
It's funny how like throughout life we get these little slices of like if you're lucky, you get little slices of like what someone experiences completely. You know, you get a little piece of it, they get it completely. And when you first told me that, I made the mental connection, like, okay, Utah, 9/11 just happened. You're a darker skinned guy. Okay, I can see that being uncomfortable. And then honest to God, I didn't really empathize for your situation and what you were sharing until I went to Montana.
Yeah.
And people looked at me like I had 3 heads because I walk with a limp. You know, like I was an alien. And I was like, holy sh-. And so I got that experience at like 3 grocery stores. And that was enough for me to be like, this is fucking horrible.
And you mentioned this thing.
And I didn't even grow up with it, right? So that's when I was like, oh my God, like this, I have a way of actually trying to see this now.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, I didn't before.
It's hard. It's hard to know what it's like to be in the minority and to be in the unaccepted minority.
And you would think like having the spinal cord injury would be enough for that. But like, because I walk, like when I was in a wheelchair, people did look at me differently. People did treat me differently. It's very different. Even though I walk funny, like it's a whole different ball game, you know, than being in an actual wheelchair. So like my experience day to day is light years different from someone who lives in a wheelchair. But yeah, it's just these little glimpses, man. It was really interesting.
There's probably some amount of unresolved contempt that I have for people who stare. Because I haven't, like, I don't think about it anymore because it just doesn't happen anymore in San Diego.
Yeah.
I just don't, it just doesn't happen.
That's where I was going with this actually, and I forgot my point. Living here, I like never feel it.
Yeah.
No one ever looks at me funny.
Yeah.
If someone brings it up, it's really polite and cool. Like
Yeah.
it's not a thing here.
No.
Nobody gives a shit. It's amazing. I love it.
I love it too. I love the diversity, and I love the just I don't have to think about my race. You know, when I never got the people trying to be nice to me because of my race. Like they weren't ever extra like, oh, I have to be extra nice to the minority guy. It was always the opposite. It's like, I'm going to be extra shitty to this guy. And it's like, it's totally uncalled for, you know. I have one question for you. Actually, I have multiple questions, but
Fire away.
we should wrap up. But I have one big question for you. Did you ever hold resentment towards Tim?
That's a really great question. And the God's honest truth is not even in the slightest.
Wow.
Not even close. No, it was my idea. I was doing tons of shit like that.
Yeah.
We all were. It was inevitable. It was gonna.
What was it? The one rock? What it was called?
Big Rock.
Big Rock. Yeah.
I mean, we jumped off the Ingram Street bridges for fun.
Whoa.
Like we were lunatics, you know. Like
Whoa.
one of us was gonna get hurt at some point, and it just happened to be me. But like, I honestly like. Where I actually do have, it's kind of funny though, a little bit of a bone to pick with Tim, which is complicated because I think because we went through something so traumatic, I always really wanted him to be like a close friend, you know, like and in ways we were, but in ways we weren't. And so then like as time went on, it was like, honestly, like it's kind of kudos to him, and like if we're not like compatible friends, then he didn't like go out, he didn't make extra effort to like stay friends with me, you know? And I always kind of felt like I really wanted us to keep a really close friendship. And so that's where, if I honestly have resentment towards Tim, that's where it would be.
Interesting.
But, you know, I mean, everybody lives their own life, and I think in a lot of ways, like maybe I did some immature stuff, and you know, he's a guy who's got his own stuff going on too. Like we're all trying to find our way through this thing. But I have absolutely no resentment at all for like
That's crazy.
What we did as kids. Like,
I think you're a better person than me. I think I would hold resentment, but I'm kind of.
No, I mean, it's just like maybe if he was drinking and driving, and I was in his car and he crashed.
Sure.
But like me asking him to push me down a hill in a trash can.
You're asking for it. You're asking for it.
You know, like if you're gonna do something dumb, you gotta be ready for the consequences. Wow. You know.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
He's a
think,
great guy though, really good guy. Like all the guys who were with me were awesome dudes.
hmm
Yeah.
What a life-changing event. Yeah, I have so
Crazy,
many
man.
more questions, but this was a lot, and I think this was pretty good. And yeah, this is, social thorns talking about uncomfortable shit. That was uncomfortable to listen to. I mean, I think a lot of people wouldn't want to even hear about that.
I'm glad you were uncomfortable.
I was uncomfortable.
I was uncomfortable talking about the part at the bottom of the hill because as I talk about it and think about it, I almost feel it again. But the rest of the stuff's just me talking about me, which I like doing. So it's easy.
Favorite subject, right? Yeah, that was tough to hear.
Thanks for listening, man.
That was tough.
That's the gist of it. And then there's like the whole part 2, which is like after surgery.
Yeah, that's the whole other thing.
and the rehab part.
That's a whole other one.
And that's probably interesting up until about a year or 2 out, and then it kind of stops being interesting.
Next time.
As in
Another time.
Another time.
Yeah. All right, man.
Cool.
Great conversation. All right.
Sweet.